All right, so we're talking about ServiceNow. So just to make sure that everyone's clear, if you're using Ansible, you may be using it from like an open source community perspective. So that's what this link is. And these links that are in these slides, I'll leave them behind in a couple different places. So you'll find a link back at, if you join this from the meetup group, every time we have an event in the meetup page, it'll show like the current event like today, but then afterwards it'll have past events. So you can always go back into a past event, and then that's where I'll include like slides and things like that. So you can go back and get it from there. I also, as you noticed, I'm recording this call. So this will show up on my Ansible for Networks YouTube channel. And you can go there and when you go to a particular meetup video, I usually do the same thing. I'll have in the description, I'll have the link to the slides. And then sometimes I'll have additional links to like repos and like, other important information that was a part of that meetup. So you'll be able to get to it from there. The meetup side, I'll link to the YouTube. If you just in YouTube search for Ansible for networking, you'll find it that way as well. So the first one here is the Galaxy collection. So this one is the upstream version of it that we had with ServiceNow. And these are the collection of modules that we would use with Ansible. And then the second one here is the certified content. So this collection is accessed through console.redhat.com. And this is like the actual, direct link to this tile here. And in order to have access to this particular collection, you have to have, you're a customer and you have a subscription. And your subscription of the Ansible automation platform gets you access to this. So the Galaxy and open source, really the biggest difference here is sometimes the collections may have, different modules. For the most part, they're the same. It's just the support of it. So on the Galaxy side, if you're having issues, you can certainly go to GitHub. If you go to the repo link, on Galaxy for that particular collection, and you can log issues there, like if something's not working, and then there's contributors that pay attention to that will help you out. Or if you actually find a solution, then you can do a pull request, and after they test it, they'll accept it, and then you'll actually contribute to their code. With the certified content, it's a bit different because you can open up tickets with Red Hat, and then Red Hat would do like all the triage between us and ServiceNow, or any vendor that you happen to have an issue with the collection. So they kind of sit in between there as the liaison and provide triage and troubleshooting and things like that. So those are the links of what you would need. In order to run Ansible, you have to have the modules, and the modules are packaged in these collections. Depending on how you're running Ansible, then those collections would also be installed into an execution environment, right? So we don't get into too many of those details today, but that's really what's running under the hood. And I have a lot of other videos and stuff. And on Red Hat, there's a lot of self-paced labs and things that show you how to set up EEs. It's fairly straightforward. It's just a containerized way of having all the dependencies you need to run, said modules and collections and things, as part of Ansible. So this next one here is event-driven Ansible. So the environment that I'm using doesn't have an EDA server running. So what the EDA server is it provides, like it says, event-driven Ansible, but that means event-driven automation. So it's a way of receiving data. And once receiving that data can be evaluated, right? So you can set conditions, and those are called rules. So instead of playbooks, we have rule books. And these rule books are set to, once triggered from a condition, then there's an action, a response. So normally that response could be running a playbook or sending a notification. It could be actually triggering an entire workflow, like orchestrating a workflow of multiple playbooks in the automation platform. There's a lot of different actions that you can set. But in order for it to work with event-driven Ansible plus ServiceNow, then that's what this is. So this is the App Store, and it's a way of making this available. And essentially what it's going to do is it's going to create like this wrapper around a webhook that provides a way for, when you're using ServiceNow as an ITSM, in your incidents, you may want to, as part of it, one of the steps in a workflow on that side could be to trigger a job template, which would run a playbook and automation controller. So it's like automation controller would be set, through EDA to receive that data from ServiceNow, trigger, and then run a playbook, depending on, how it's set up, right? So there's a lot of different scenarios. So this one is the EDA is not in this environment, so I can't show that to you, but it is free. Like, so you turn this on and it creates that wrapper around webhooks, right, on the ServiceNow side. And then you would need to have, obviously, an automation controller and an EDA server running in your environment, right? And then you would set up a rule book so, it could receive that webhook on a port, and then you could act, upon that. So I've done other sessions on EDA before. So there's other examples if you go to that same YouTube that show, like, here's how EDA works in general. And I'll probably wind up doing one for ServiceNow and Palo Alto are two things I've been thinking about creating a video for that. But right now I have some Cisco networking ones. And on Red Hat's site, on their YouTube channel, there's a bunch of other examples like Dynatrace and, a bunch of other observability tools. So it'll give you a general idea of how it works and creates like a feedback loop. It's pretty interesting. All right, so those are like the bits of code and where you would go to get your collections and things like that. So I have those things set up in my environment already. So what I wanted to do is show you really a basic demo of integration. So the first demo is around incidents, right? So if I want to create an incident, effectively create a ticket because I'm troubleshooting something, I can easily do that with the collection. And in this scenario, we have a Cisco environment, and we're running a compliance check. And in that compliance check, the router needs to have a banner. It doesn't have a banner, so that creates a failed condition, which opens up an incident in ServiceNow. So when we resolve that issue, and we'll go through a workflow, right? So a workflow is like an orchestration of running multiple playbooks. So think of it as like that's playbook one, and then playbook two, we're going to resolve the issue. And then we're going to update an approval process in our workflow to say, okay, it's been resolved. So it will notify upon that resolution back to ServiceNow so that we can close out that ticket. So it's, basic workflow, something's broken, something's fixed. Let's create a ticket, let's update a ticket, or incident rather. The second one is we can use Ansible to update the CMDB information for devices in ServiceNow. So all I'm going to do is I want to add a router one that's in my demo environment. I want to populate some basic information like, vendor model, serial number, and the IP address. So the IP address is paramount, to being able to resolve in Ansible through an inventory, a target that we want to hit. So we want to hit this router, but we want to hit it from an inventory that we're going to derive from the CMDB information that's in ServiceNow. So ServiceNow just becomes a source of truth. And it also provides us a list of devices, and the IP addresses of those devices is critical information that we need in our inventory. So once we have that inventory, I can use it to run a playbook against router one, right? And it was gleaned from ServiceNow. So that way, if we have devices being added and removed, and all that CMDB is being updated in ServiceNow, then we can update our inventory dynamically. So it happens, before we run a playbook, we'll sync that inventory, and then we'll have the latest configuration for devices and their IP addresses that we can use for particular groups that we want to automate against. So that one will make a little bit more sense as we go through it, but it's a fairly straightforward process. And similar to the process of using dynamic inventories for ServiceNow, it would be the same thing for other types of solutions that also would be good candidates for the source of inventories, like things like IPAM, like InfoBlocks or NetBox, and other systems that have data, config data, and IP addressing, are good sources for dynamic inventories. So there's quite a bit of detail in each one of these. So I'll have to set my screen up so that I can show you the thing, and then I'll walk through how the playbook worked. So we'll see it happen, and then we'll kind of, dissect it a bit to see like what we had to configure to make it happen. And we'll walk through those. Some of these other demo files here are a bit more advanced than what I'm doing. So again, you'll have these links, but there's another repo that has some ServiceNow demos that are, a team in Red Hat put together. So you can see like some differences depending on how you're configuring ServiceNow. And there's also some examples of using that event-driven Ansible for ServiceNow. So you'll have these links. You'll be able to go to those. There's a lot of screenshots of what the GUI config looks like on the ServiceNow side, so they're really good examples to follow. And then I'll give you the repo that I'm using will be I'll put that on the event as well, the past event, and also on the YouTube, so you'll be able to go to my repo and see it. And I think I actually have it in a slide somewhere here too, maybe. If not, I'll put that in there before I save this as a PDF. I think this is the last slide I had. All right, so having said that, we'll go ahead and get into the actual demo piece, unless anyone has any high-level questions before we start seeing this in action. And let me check and make sure there's anything in here. Oh, the YouTube. So if you go to, I think it's just YouTube at this will get you there. Let me try something like, I think it's at, I think that'll get you there. Let me try real quick. There's my playlist one. And let me drop that in there. These are demos though, so I think you just take the playlist part off and it. What did I do? Oh, it's youtube.com at Ansel. Okay, I see what I did. All right, so let me jump back into with you guys. So disregard that. So those are demos, and this would be like the meetups would be this one. Okay, so let me go ahead and show you my repo here, and I'll just pop this link in. So here is to the ServiceNow stuff. All right, so that's my repo that goes directly, to those files, and then so I do need to grab this password before we get started, and I'll bring this down. Now that I don't know if that broke that or not. For if you see it, let me change this. I'm afraid I might need to just do my whole screen here so you don't miss out on anything. So let me stop this and just do the entire screen. All right, so I want that, and I want to log into this sucker. All right, so this is the automation controller. All right, and we'll go to the job templates that we need here in a second. So I'm going to go ahead and move this over. And then these are different steps. So we're doing quite a few things. So I just want to make sure that I don't miss anything. So one of the things that I need to do is I need a credential from ServiceNow. So we do have a demo environment that's a part of these instruct labs that this link is interesting because you can actually go to this and there's other labs in this environment that you can run. But what I want is just the account so I can use this ServiceNow. So this is going to take a few minutes to log in and bring up the environment. So while that's happening, let's go ahead and walk through this real quick. So this is the automation controller. Some of you may be seeing this for the first time, so I just want to give you a quick walkthrough of some of the things we're going to do. So one of the things is there is a workflow. in the workflow is a ServiceNow workflow. So this is what I mentioned earlier. We're going to create, we're going to run this and it's going to check to see if there's a banner, and there's not going to be, so it's going to fail. So this workflow is going to get stuck here in this approval step. So we need to fix that issue. This will create a ServiceNow incident. So we need that information so we can log into ServiceNow and take a look at it. And it's also going to create a job number when we run this. So we need the job number for our workflow, because when we fix the issue, we want to send through the API the approval to say, okay, we've troubleshot it, it's approved to move forward. And then it's going to ensure the banner's there. And if it is, it's going to close the ticket for us in ServiceNow, and we'll be able to double check that as well to validate that it actually happened. So that's what's going to happen in the first part of the demonstration. Some of the other things that are interesting is if I click into here, or actually go into this right here, the information part of it, you can see that this first part is using this workshop inventory. So we're not using ServiceNow as an inventory yet, because we need to configure ServiceNow to have some router information in it. So this is like an inventory that's already in, that pre-exists in my controller. And we're using the student project. So student project is actually mapped to a Git, actually a Git repository, so that we pull down playbooks and such and run them from the repo, as opposed to having them installed locally where I'm running the controller. So that's best practice, so we can have proper version control and source control management of our playbooks. And this is the first playbook that we're running, is this banner incident.yaml. So the job template maps to the playbook and the settings for running that playbook. And then we have here a failed condition. So if it were to work, if our compliance check actually worked, which it's designed, it's contrived so it doesn't work, right? But if it did work, we would stop here. But we have a failed condition in red. So because it fails, it's going to want to go to this approval. And then once it's approved, then a successful approval would say, okay, now run this one. And this one is checking what's going on, and then making sure that the banner is there. So it's like a validation, and then it's going to update the ticket. So all of that stuff is in the repo. But I think before going into the repo, what I want to do is go back and see if this is done. All right, so it's still doing its thing. So if I go into this repo, and this is the steps, right? But in the repo, these are the files. So the first one that we're running is this banner incident. So we'll go ahead and just take a look at this until that other stuff is finished. So this is pretty straightforward. It's just a simple playbook, right, that we're running against router one. But this router one is in the pre-existing inventory that we have, that was a part of the workshop inventory, and we're running or including a role. So the role is called incident. So if I go back here and go into roles, and we look at incident and task, this is what's actually happening. So these are the tasks in the playbook, and you can see different modules that we're using. So we have some Cisco modules, right? So here's a config module. Here's where it fails, right? Because we're going to remove any existing banners. So that's going to create a failed condition, because what's going to happen is what we're going to do now is do a show command effectively to see the state of the banner, and then register that into memory. So that's going to show that there's no banner, right? So this is going to have a condition to say if the banner is length 0, right? There's nothing in it. It's an empty banner. Then we're going to create a ticket, because that's indicative of failing, right? Because we don't have a banner. So it's a straight up compliance check. We're going to log into ServiceNow, and we're using the ServiceNow ITSM collection. So the ITSM collection was the certified collection. The other one that was on Galaxy was ServiceNow.ServiceNow. So this one is the certified collection, and that'll open up the ticket. So the rest of this is just for those purposes. So I think by now we should have this. So let me hit start. And once the screen refreshes, we'll see what our password is. All right, so if I click on the README, it's set. Well, I have to do this. I click on the README. And the reason why I clicked on the README instead of just using this README file, as it's rendered over here, is I can't copy out of that one. So if I copy this, it's the same for the username and password. So I just copy it one time, and then I can use that over here. So as we go over here, let me make this a little bit larger for the moment so we can see it. I can launch this workflow from here. So when I launch the workflow, we're presented with a self-service survey, right? So this is kind of like a poor man's ServiceNow front end. So this just gives us a way of prompting for variables, to define variables. So what we need is the username and password. So let's drop these in here. And then those are going to be converted into variables. So you can see SN underscore username, right? And then it encrypts passwords so you can't see them, but it's the SN underscore password, and it's the same thing, right? So what this is a temporary credential that's in this lab environment, this instruct lab environment that we run. And I'll give you a link too, because there's a bunch of other instruct labs that might be interesting to you that are on they're always on, and you can access them whenever you want. So when I launch this, it's going to use those credentials, and this is the workflow, right? But if I go to jobs, we'll see everything that's running. So you had the workflow, and then we had the playbook. So the playbook was the one that is going to go through, and it's going to fail because one of those tasks was to do, to set it to not having a banner. So we fail because we have that condition, right? So if we have an empty banner, then it's going to open up an incident. So we need this ID. This is important for us. All right, so if I hit Control C, I can copy it off that screen. Now, the other thing that's important is I need to note this job ID number, because we need that as well. So this is the job that's running in the Ansible controller. So I need 64 for that, and I need this incident. So the next thing that we want to do is let's take a look at our workflow, and we'll see that it's still running. The reason why it's running is we're stuck in this approval step. So until that's approved, it's just going to sit there and run, because I made it in an indefinite amount of time that the approval will just sit there and wait until we're ready. So maybe we fix this thing and we still don't approve it right away because we need a downtime. So that's how these approval checks are used. And we'll have roles-based access, so you can set like who is actually an approver, right? So you can have different teams of people that have more privilege level in that regard, right, to approve things. So we're just sitting here stuck. So the next thing that we want to do is we want to fix that banner. So there is another playbook in here. Let's make this larger. So if I go back to this directory in the GitLab repository, there's this snow fix, right? So in this one here, what we're going to do, oh, I'm sorry, that's not the right one. Go back. It's the banner fix. All right, so this one is, again, a Cisco collection. So we're going to configure the iOS banner, but you can see that it's just variabilized, right? And the default here is none. So how are we going to populate this? When we run this, it's going to give us a prompt again. And the prompt is going to ask us for the contents of the banner. So that's why it's just like, at this point in time, it's essentially just a placeholder. So, and then what we're going to do is we're going to update information based off of that job ID, right? So that gives us access to that approval node over here, and you can see the action is approved. So it's like push, instead of clicking on approve here, like if I click into here, I can click on this button. This is, equivalent to that same button, right? Just doing it through a playbook. Or you could do this through a REST API call or other integrations, right? So that's what we want to do, but it hasn't happened yet because we need to run it. So what I need to do is find that one. So let's go ahead and search for fix. I guess I need more than that. So, all right, let's try banner. Okay, so here we go. Network banner fix. So I'll launch that one, and here's the contents, right? So just so you know that there's no funny business, let me pop back in here. If anyone wants to just add something into the chat room for a banner, so you know that this is happening now. So if anyone has trust issues, then we can resolve that. This is not anything preset. Just anything. Just anyone's still awake. If you could just put anything in the chat. Okay. So the banner is banner. I'm not even going to type it. Okay. So let's go ahead and bring this back up. Pop it in here. All right. So there's our banner. And then it wants that workflow ID. So luckily I wrote that down so we don't have to go back and figure that out. So I'll click next. And then we'll launch this. Did I do the, oh, maybe I did the wrong one. Let's see. I thought it was 64. Oh, the workflow 63. My bad. All right. So I'm going to have to rerun that one. So the cool thing is like when something fails like that, well, actually, because it has the prompt, I want to go all the way back. So I'll have to go to the template. So I wrote down 64. Look at dummy. It's 63. All right. So template, banner. Run it again so I get prompted. $63. Launch. Okay, so that time it worked. And what you'll notice is, all right, so here's our workflow. Let's see what's going on in here. You can see that that approved it, and now we're running the second playbook. So that's actually going to close the ticket. So earlier, so we can see that the ticket was open and closed. What I'll do is I need to use that incident ID that we got earlier. So if I go back to jobs, I'll just click in here and click in here and go to the output. Yeah, this output. I need this. This demo has a lot of moving parts, so I forgot to do that. So we go into here, and I should just be able to click in here and be logged in already. Let's make this a little bit larger in ServiceNow. Let's go in incidents. And then we actually resolved that one, so I should just be able to find it under closed. Or let me put the whole number in. It's only looking at new ones. I can change that. Go back. I didn't mean to click in there. So in incidents, let me just paste this in real quick. Active, closed. And then put that in. Okay, here it is. Yeah, because it wasn't active anymore, I need to find it from closed. So we can see that when it opened it up, it says router device is out of compliance. You can see it was open right here. The times are a little bit funky, right? Because the time zone that's set, in this instruct is not on East Coast time. But then we opened it and then we just closed it. and then you can see that that it was updated. The marking, that now there is a banner, so that's why it was able to be closed. So it's just basic, ticket information from there. So that was pretty much it. Open the ticket and close the ticket once we resolved the issue, and we had that approval was from running the fixed playbook. So that's a basic incident. The next thing is using the ServiceNow for our inventory. So pretty straightforward for opening and shutting tickets or closing tickets rather. All right. So for the inventory, what I need to do is I need to grab that password again from here because it's going to ask me for that. Normally, I would create a permanent credential, but because I only have this environment, it's temporary. I have to keep changing it every time. So we're just going to add it into our inventory source before we run it. So we'll go to inventories. Oh, I'm getting ahead of myself. Before we go to inventories, we want to do the CMDB. Right. So that's why I needed to check myself, right? Because I've got all that other stuff that's in here. So if I go back into here to the README, the next thing that we actually want to do is the CMDB. So I do have a different job template for that network CMDB. So let's bring that one up. All right, so it's that one. Before I run it, let's just look at it real quick. So fix incident resolve. Let's see what the name is in here. So when I click in the job template, it shows that we're going to this update CMDB playbook. So here's what we're doing in that one. So we could see that as we scroll down here, we're going to give it the name. This is a ServiceNow module, this configuration item. So we're going to name it router one, and then we're going to pull in the IP address because we have that already in the system because it was in that workshop inventory. So what I can do is I can pull that in from the host vars, and the Ansible host would be like the IP address. The name's router one in that existing inventory, but the Ansible underscore host would be its IP address. And I want to use that IP address because when we create this new inventory, that's the IP address that we'll grab and then be able to run subsequent playbooks, from that inventory. Or if it had a different IP address that changed or whatever, then ServiceNow is providing that IP address. So here's the it's in this IP router class. The manufacturer Cisco, it's a router. A firmware manufacturer Cisco. So like all this information is being populated, and this is just like a little sampling. There's tons of other config data that we could upload. Push that config into the CMDB information from Ansible into ServiceNow. So that's what's happening here. So I'll go ahead and launch this playbook, and then it wants it has to log in again. So let's pop those in real quick. And again, normally you would have a credential, so it's permanently in there until you update it. Credentials are over here, by the way. You set them in there. All right, so here's what it sent. See how there's all these other parameters that we're not setting. So you can see what in the invoke. You can see, or if you go to the documentation, you can see the structured data and all the parameters that are there. We're just populating, just very few. There's that IP address right there, right, and just the other things that we had, like the name and all that stuff. So you'll see them as we scroll down. But there's a lot more information that we could have uploaded, but it's there now. So the next thing that we want to do is now that we've updated ServiceNow, I can go to it in my inventory, and I have this snow inventory, and then in the inventory I have sources. So I have this source for ServiceNow here. So what I want to do is I want to sync up, but the problem is that we have to authenticate. So what I want to do is go into edit, and I need to fix this. And we would have used, again, a credential. Like we would just have credentials for all this stuff. These are extra variables, so I'm just populating them here. It's just convenient. So save those, and then we'll do a sync. So it's going to that ServiceNow that's running, over here. And I'll show you. Here's the URL for it. But to get your credential, you have to log in through that lab interface. So it looked like it just successfully synced. So what I should expect to see is in my inventory just a router 1 host, right? And then when I click on it, this should be the current IP address of router 1. And if it's not, then we won't be able to connect to it. So the next part of this is we want to test this out and connect to it using this inventory. So if I go back into the repo quickly, and then I'm going to show you, I just want to move back here. Let's make this a little bit bigger. All right, so what we want to do is run facts. So all this is just gathering facts from that router 1. The host just says also, like, I only have the one router anyway, so if we had more than one, it would just iterate through them. Or I could put, like, I could have grouped it, made a group, like, called it Cisco, and then had router 1 through however many of them I had, and then it'll run it that way. So this is just like basic, playbook configuration. So here it's just going to pick up the router 1. And what we're going to do is we're running iOS_facts module, and because it doesn't have any other parameters set, it's going to run the default. So the default is just a minimum or minimal. And that's just like a show ver. So it's going to show like the router version it's running, firmware, and also it's going to show like serial number and things like that. So that's what it'll run. But we need to be able to connect to router 1. So let's go ahead and find that job template. So I think it was called something fact. So it's the ServiceNow fact. This time we're connecting to the router, so we don't need those ServiceNow credentials. And I already have the credentials set for the router because I know what they are. It's just using the SSH key. All right, so we click on here, and we see that basic information. It's a Catalyst 8000V, and here's the version that we're running. It's router 1, so all this is just basic information. It's, some of this is the same type of information that we would use to update, the CMDB. So we just did like kind of like a subset of even this. So, so that worked there. So the other thing to see is like in details, you can see that we use the Snow inventory, right? So if we didn't have router 1 in there, we wouldn't have been able to connect to it. And router 1 wasn't there until we synced the repository. I'm sorry, we synced that source for the inventory for ServiceNow, and router 1 was there because we pushed a config into the ServiceNow CMDB. So it's kind of like chicken and the egg type of thing. So Ansible can feed configurations or push configurations into ServiceNow, and also use ServiceNow as a source for things like incidents and making changes, but also as a dynamic inventory source, since it has host and IP address information as part of its database. So it's a good candidate to use in that regard. So I think that was everything for this one. Let me see. Go back to here. Yeah, we did the facts. The only other thing to show you real quick is how you do the dynamic inventory. So they all have like a config that you need to set up. So the plugins are in the collections, but you have to set like a config. So if I go into a dynamic inventory, so this is the ServiceNow one here. This was just a basic config, and we just set it up under just the IP routers and just their IP. So I didn't do like a group, because we just had that one type. But we can make this more specific. But this is just a basic config, for configuring the ServiceNow inventory plugin. Another thing is you have to enable it. So that's the config. To enable it is in your Ansible.cfg file. And what you'll see is enable plugins. So actually, this one I didn't have to do that. I guess it was set up different. It probably finds it under auto since it's in there a little bit different. But like DNA Center, I definitely had to add that one in here into the configuration. Yeah, so sometimes you have to add it in here. Sometimes it'll just show up automatically. So just a couple different places, but the documentation shows you where and what you need to set. So you've got your Ansible.config file to enable plugins, and then you've got your configuration for the plugin, and then you need to enable it as a source, in your Ansible automation controller. So let me move back here. So that was the basic demonstration. I do have like some of those other links for more advanced demos. So this was just kind of like, let's get started with ServiceNow for network automation. But we have a couple of minutes, so I just wanted to make sure that there's no questions that anyone has. So I'll just open the floor right now if anyone has anything before we drop off and I stop the recording. Oh, so that sandbox, let me yes.
Hey Tony, hi, this is Andrea. I'm listening in because I'm trying to make a move back towards software engineering tech ops. And of this platform, ServiceNow and Ansible, what would you recommend that I also freshen up on about these relationships between this platform and Ansible?
Well, I think that I guess it depends on your focal point. So most of what we're talking about here is like ITSM driven automations. So obviously ServiceNow is the best of breed, in terms of like vendors that provide kind of like that front end that from the self-service to the CMDB and all that kind of stuff, and the incidents. But there's a lot of other service desk types of things out there too. Ansible kind of works the same regardless what's northbound of it in that regard, because it kind of fits that role of being like the provisioner for the ITSM.
Mm-hmm.
But then Ansible does like a
Right.
lot of different things because it's really meant for that, but it's also meant for folks that are going more into like infrastructure as code types of parameters, or like I focus on network, so like more like the network as code, types of things where you're using
Mm-hmm.
repositories.
Exactly.
Yeah, so I guess it depends like on what the focus is. If it's more like IT services and things like that, but if it's more like DevOps teams, then probably there's a lot more to learn. Ansible does so much more, on that side of things.
Mhm. Okay. And what about compliance as a service? Is this also a good platform for that?
Oh yeah, well actually, both of them serve a role. Um, One of the things that's interesting. Oh, I'm in the wrong. I was trying to grab. I'm sorry, I distracted myself. I'm trying to grab this link real quick. I need to be in. Where's it at? There it is. So let me grab this real quick. This is all the labs I was talking about that are on ServiceNow. So this one is free and it's up all the time. So I'm just going to put that in the chat real quick. So you can access these at any time. Okay, I'm sorry. So could you repeat your question again? I just forgot.
Oh, no, it's fine. I think I was talking more general if the ServiceNow platform can be used for compliance as a service solutioning as well.
Yeah, I think so because especially like with Ansible, because like everything's in there in the CMDB. So Ansible can go, it's well suited to go out to devices and to other APIs like in cloud and things like that to see what the current state is of a config. So that can happen like scheduled, and then it can update, you know, through the collection like we use for like the CMDB stuff to see, what is in ServiceNow and what's actually running in the device at any particular time. And if there's a diff between them, then it's in a good position to list out which devices are out of compliance. And then what do you want to do? Do
Mhm.
you want to actually resolve them, remediate now, or do you want just that information so that later you can schedule downtime and then push those configuration changes? So I think that
Mhm.
they work better together in that regard. You can do a lot of automation with ServiceNow too, but it's a bit trickier. I think that the abstractions that are in Ansible make it so easy to deal with a lot of different types of devices. So it becomes, very easy to interact with other things. But then Ansible's not meant to be like a database of everything. So like ServiceNow is like that database
Right.
where everything kind of sits. So it's a great single source of truth for that stuff. So we do a lot of compliance things where sometimes it might only be a file. Like maybe someone has like a file with like, here's what the config is supposed to be, like a YAML file or CSV files or spreadsheets or whatever. But a lot of times, more currently, you'll find like it's ServiceNow or something like Netbox, if you're familiar with that, or any of those like config
Mhm.
based
Yep.
systems that have everything there, like a one stop shop. And then Ansible would be great at like, okay, when
Mhm.
something changes, I need to see if that was supposed to change or not, because you may want to overwrite things, or you may want to now update what the CMDB is because someone went out of band and changed something like on a router to fix something, but it wasn't necessarily making its way back to
Mhm.
ServiceNow. So it can, sit in between the two. So we see a lot of that kind of stuff. It just depends on what the
Just kind of like a
customer.
little listener.
Yeah, yeah, and that's the EDA thing I was mentioning too, where Ansible can receive. Sometimes you can set that up like devices can directly say like, "Hey, my config just changed, and here's what changed," and then send that to EDA, and then Ansible could run like a playbook to tell, "Hey, ServiceNow, I just heard that there was a change." So you could let Ansible be like the tattletale, where the devices tell Ansible, and then Ansible tells ServiceNow, and that could happen in real time. So it's not like we used to be bound by like scheduling and all that kind of stuff. So
Yeah.
it's like a on demand feedback loop type of thing. Discord. I do have a Discord. I haven't been following it too much lately, but I'll I'll grab that and put the Discord link because I don't even have it. Like I'd have to update it to get it to turn back on. But I'll put that back in this slide deck, and you'll find that on the event, or if you go to the YouTube, you'll see it there as well. But we do have a Discord. We weren't doing that a lot because we were doing some labs, like a study group to study for one of the certification tests. But since we finished that, I haven't been on it as much. But I can definitely bring that back up. So yeah. So thanks for joining. I hope it was valuable. Again, this is just kind of like intro kind of level, but there's a lot more to it. So we'll probably have more service now in the future with like a bit more complex use case. And then we have, obviously every month I have like a different topic. So we did Netbox last time. So next time I'm not exactly sure which one, but I'll have it posted soon. So look forward to seeing some of you again on the next one. So I'm gonna stop the. There it is. I'm stopping the recording.